Thank you for calling the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Northwestern Division for today's Missouri Basin Conference call. This call is provided as a courtesy to congressional representatives, tribal, state, and local government officials, including levy sponsors and emergency managers, and the media. I'm Eileen Williamson, and I will be your moderator. This call is recorded and placed on the Defense Video and Imagery Distribution Service for media reuse at www.dvidshub.net/unit/USACE-NWD. Your participation acknowledges your consent to be recorded. All lines have been placed on mute. To unmute your line to ask a question, press *6 or use the conferencing application to come off mute. The force mute function still may not work on all phones, so if I ask, please use your phone's own mute function and do not place the call on hold. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the call. The agenda is as follows. Speaking on behalf of the NOAA Center for Environmental Information and the National Weather Service Missouri Basin River Forecast Center, we'll have Kevin Lau. And from the Missouri River Water Management Division, we will have John Remus and his staff, Matt Nelson and Ryan Larson. With that, I'll hand the call over to Kevin Lau.
Okie doke. Thank you, Eileen. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Go ahead.
All righty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the National Weather Service, I wish to thank again the Corps of Engineers for the invite to participate on this series of monthly calls. So today I'll be providing the climate and weather slides as well as the usual river flood outlook. So here we go. With the first real slide, we'll look back and see where we've been weather-wise. Here we're looking back 3 months at temperatures on the left and precipitation on the right. Looking at the departures from normal temperatures on the left, we see a pretty clear demarcation with the past 90 days overall being warmer than normal in the eastern portion of the basin, eastern Dakotas, eastern Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, and cooler than normal out to the west. Looking at the right-hand side, we see the percent of normal precipitation since March, and it's sort of a hodgepodge of pockets of above normal and pockets of below normal, depending on where you're at in the basin. With the next slide, we'll be looking at the same sort of information, temperature and precip, but now just over the past 30 days. And again, pretty much the same picture as before, temperatures being warmer than normal over the past month in the east, cooler in the west, and still a mosaic of above and below normal precipitation depicted on the right hand. Going to the next slide, I'm going to be talking about mountain snowpack. I'm always hesitant to talk about percent of average once we get past the date of peak accumulation, because percent of average after the peak is easily misunderstood. My main point with this graphic actually is twofold. First, we still have mountain snow. So I want to make that point. We still have mountain snow. And secondly, we are quickly losing that snow through melt. Some stream locations in the mountains have already seen their seasonal runoff crest, and many more will see their crest in the next few days. The Wind, Bighorn, Tongue, Yellowstone, and the upper Missouri headwaters should all crest this weekend or sometime next week. So this is the big push. With the next slide, I'll look at soil moisture from a modeling standpoint. Again, what these two graphics are trying to show is that soil moisture across the basin is still a bit lacking, but we are in much better shape now across the basin than we have been in quite some time. With the next 3 slides, I want to turn our attention to the future weather. With this particular slide, I'm showing the accumulated total precipitation that's possible or maybe likely, over the next week. So this is the next 7 days total, between now and next Thursday. It looks impressive, but really the highest amount shown within the basin is there in eastern Kansas, and it's only like an inch to 2 inches. And again, that is spread over 7 days. So it's hopeful, but not real impressive, actually. With the next slide, I'm going to be looking at what we call week 2. So this is the next week. And this is looking at not amounts of precipitation, but the likelihood of being above normal, normal, or below. And again, this covers the period between next Thursday and the following Thursday, June 20 through June 27. It does give us some hope for the basin above Rouleau, per se, of seeing some sort of rain. And the gray area that spans the remainder of the lower basin should see near normal rain, whatever that is. Okay, with the next slide, we're going to go out 3 months collectively, looking at temperature and precip. Again, this is for the months of June, July, and August all together. And for much of the basin, it says we're going to be hot and dry. But on the right-hand side, that right-hand graphic, there is a toss-up for precipitation in the eastern portion of the basin, where we've been getting hit with precipitation for the past couple of months. So Missouri, Iowa, part of the Dakotas. So it's a toss-up as to what we'll get precip-wise. Okay, next slide. The next slide is devoted to drought, with current conditions on the left and the evolution of drought on the right over the next 3 months. So on the left, currently 29% of the basin is categorized as being abnormally dry. Only 10% is actually classified as drought. So that's as of today. On the right, we see what the outlook is for drought improvement or degradation through the end of August. The grays and the greens there in Kansas and southeast Nebraska indicate drought improvement, while the yellows and the chocolate browns in both the eastern and western portions of Montana and northwest Wyoming, that has drought continuing or worsening or expanding. Okay, slide 10. Slide 10. Well, my next slide. So this is the summary slide for the weather stuff. The big ticket items here are that we are fast melting the mountain snow. Hot and dry seems to be the general descriptor for this summer across the basin. It does appear that the ENSO signal, the climate signal, is going to change over. We are currently in El Nino conditions, but it'll transfer to neutral and then to La Nina by the end of summer, if not before. And that does spell a bit of hope for the basin as a whole. La Nina typically leans toward or yields a heavier snowpack in the Rockies. But that, of course, would be next winter, and so that's way down the road. But it does bear keeping in mind that we are supposed to switch to La Nina. Okay, my very last slide deals with what I actually know something about, and that is flooding and flood risk going forward. As mentioned earlier, we are quickly melting mountain snowpack, which is normal. This is the time we do it. Many locations, as I've said before, will see their seasonal peak runoff this weekend and into early next week. Right now, we have no locations that we expect to see going above flood stage in the mountains due to the current snow melt, but there are some that's going to flirt with minor flood stage. So some of them will get close to flood over the next 5 days or so. The National Weather Service issued its June water supply forecast yesterday. All mountainous basins, with the exception of the North Platte, are showing below average April through September volumes. The North Platte is the exception, and it's showing a near to slightly above average runoff volume. Again, that's an April through September volume for the North Platte. It's been quite a busy May and early June in the lower basin. with flooding along many of the tributaries to the Missouri River within the state of Missouri. Many locations seeing multiple rounds of minor to moderate flooding due to multiple rounds of thunderstorms. Also, the Big Sioux, Little Sioux, and the Floyd Rivers up in Iowa and southeastern South Dakota have also been active over the past month and a half. With these higher tributary inflows, the lower Missouri River main stem itself has seen 2 rounds of minor level flooding, one in early May, and again, a second round of flooding along the main stem in late May. I'll also have to add that locally heavy rainfall in early May resulted in significant flooding along Clear Creek near Chinook, Montana. And that's a tributary to the Milk River. That was sort of an oddity, I guess you might say, but we did have significant flooding along that tributary to the Milk there in early May. Now, the graphic on the right-hand side shows our river flood outlook out through late August, the next 90 days. And we do expect continued off again, on again flooding to continue in the lower basin as we move into summer. Again, this is typical and it's driven by thunderstorm activity. Okay, well, that concludes the National Weather Service brief, and I'll turn it back over to you, Eileen.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And John, I'll let you introduce the staff and go from there.
Thank you, Eileen, and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. Also, a big thank you to Kevin Lau for providing his insights into what the future may hold here. As Eileen said, I'm John Remus, Chief of the Missouri River Basin Water Management Division. Our office is responsible for regulating the Missouri River mainstem reservoir system. This is the 6th of our 2024 monthly stakeholder calls. I will provide some general remarks, and then I will turn the discussion over to my senior staff for more detailed information. As always, I want to assure everyone in the basin that the Corps of Engineers remains fully committed to our flood risk reduction mission, protecting people and businesses when we can from significant runoff events that pose a threat to human health and safety. Life safety is the Corps of Engineers' priority. Further, it is important to understand that the volume, timing, and location at which runoff enters the system significantly impacts the timing and amount of water released from the reservoirs. Each runoff season or flood event is unique. Care should be taken when comparing one event to another. We at the Corps of Engineers understand the importance of the Missouri River in providing water for irrigation, municipal, and industrial uses throughout the basin. We operate the system to meet the water supply requirements of the basin to the extent reasonably possible. There is presently and will be adequate water in the reservoirs, in the river reaches between the reservoirs, as well as below the system to serve all water supply needs. I want to remind everyone that the Corps of Engineers does not provide or guarantee access to the water. Maintaining access to the water is the individual facility owner-operator's responsibility. Further, we will continue to meet our statutory obligations to operate the Missouri River mainstem reservoir system for all of its authorized project purposes, as described in the Master Water Control Manual. We will also continue to comply with all laws and the provisions of the 2018 biological opinion. As part of the Endangered Species Act compliance, we are conducting a flow test from Fort Beck Dam. This test consists of several components: an attraction peak flow that was conducted in early May, a retention period, which we are currently in, a second peak flow, a second spawning peak flow that will begin next week, and a drift flow that will end around the 1st of September. Matt Nelson will provide more details on the test flow in a few minutes. Runoff forecast will be discussed in more details in a few minutes. The runoff forecast, which will be discussed in more detail in a few minutes, has improved steadily through the spring due to normal to above normal precipitation over a good portion of the upper basin. The projected reservoir releases and pool levels that will be presented are based on the best available information. Actual conditions may be different. This concludes my initial remarks. Thank you very much. I will now turn the discussion over to Ryan Larson.
Thanks, John. Next slide, Eileen. The 2024 calendar year runoff forecast for the upper Missouri River Basin above Sioux City, Iowa, which is highlighted in red, is 21 million acre feet, or 82% of average. The current month's forecast is 1.8 million acre feet higher than the May 1st forecast. 1.0 million acre feet of that increase is from higher than forecasted May runoff. Next slide. The 2024 calendar year forecast reflects current improved soil moisture conditions in eastern portions of the basin and below average mountain snowpack. As seen on this slide, observed May runoff was near average and 1.0 million acre feet higher than forecasted, caused by much above average rainfall over eastern portions of the basin. One storm tracking through eastern Nebraska and western Iowa produced 1 hour rainfall intensities near a 1,000-year return interval, resulting in localized flooding. Although runoff during June and July is still forecasted to be below average, the forecast has increased from last month. May through July is typically when mountain snowpack melts, and the mountain snowpack has seen some late season gains that has extended the melt period. Moving to slide 16. Mountain snowpack peaked below normal and approximately 1 week earlier than normal in both the above Fort Peck and Fort Peck to Garrison reaches. The mountain snowpack in the above Fort Peck reach peaked on April 9th at 73% of normal, shown in the graphic on the left, and the mountain snowpack in the Fort Peck to Garrison reach peaked on April 10th at 82% of normal, shown in the graphic on the right. Although the initial melt period began earlier than average, as I mentioned earlier, late season accumulation has extended the melt period for both reaches. The snowpack in both reaches is tracking near the average melt line, shown in red. As of June 3rd, 36% and 51% of the annual peak remains in the above Fort Peck and Fort Peck to Garrison reaches, respectively. In summary, the 2024 calendar year runoff forecast is 21.0 million acre feet, 82% of average. I will now turn it over to Matt.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Gavin's Point releases averaged 25,300 CFS in the month of May. Releases are currently at 29,000 CFS and are expected to remain at that rate for the next 2 weeks. Releases will be adjusted as needed to meet downstream targets. For the monthly simulations, the basic simulation uses the runoff forecast that Ryan just discussed. Due to the amount of variability that can occur over the next several months, we also develop an upper and lower runoff that are then used in the upper and lower basic simulations. These simulations provide a range of reservoir elevations and releases that may be expected under the different runoff scenarios. The discussion to follow will focus on the basic, or most likely, simulation. Information on the other studies is posted on our website. The slide shown here shows that the system storage is currently at 55.1 million acre feet, which is 1.0 million acre feet below the base of the annual flood control zone. Moving on to slide 19 and looking at the upper three reservoirs, Fort Peck and Oahe are currently 2.4 and 4.4 feet below the base of their respective flood control pools. Garrison is 0.9 feet above the base of the flood pool. Fort Peck Reservoir appears to be near a peak. I'll discuss the Fort Peck releases on a later slide. Garrison Reservoir is expected to peak near elevation 1842, about 5 feet into its flood control pool. Releases were increased from 21,000 to 22,000 CFS yesterday and are expected to remain near that rate this summer. Oahe Reservoir likely peaked earlier this spring, just above elevation 1604. Peak releases are expected to average around 33,000 CFS this summer. Moving on to slide 20. This details the master manual system storage checks. The service level is used to determine releases from Gavin's Point Dam to support navigation and, in combination with a bank stabilization and navigation project, to help provide the downstream navigation channel. The navigation service level at the start of the navigation season is typically based on the March 15th system storage. We are currently providing flow support at a level 500 CFS below full service based on the March 15th storage check. The service level for the remainder of the navigation season and the navigation season length are based on the July 1st system storage. Under the basic forecast, flow support for navigation would be reduced to approximately 1,000 CFS below full service after the July 1st storage check. It would be a normal 8-month navigation flow support season. For this level of service on the basic simulation, Gavin's Point monthly average releases range from approximately 29,000 to 33,000 CFS. Releases will depend on downstream conditions and may be reduced in response to downstream flooding. The effectiveness of the reservoir system to reduce peak stages along the lower river diminishes as you move downstream due to travel time. Next slide, Eileen. Test releases from Fort Peck to assess the potential benefits of alternative management scenarios for the pallid sturgeon were implemented starting April 26th. The first period of higher Fort Peck releases has been completed. The peak target flows for the first part of the test were 18,000 CFS at Wolf Point, Montana. Fort Peck releases are currently 10,000 CFS. Releases will start to increase next week as part of the second higher release period. Peak flows of 22,500 CFS at Wolf Point will occur later in June. The water released from Fort Peck is being captured in Garrison. The releases from Gavin's Point are unaffected by this test. We are hosting weekly virtual meetings during the flow test to update the public on test progress and planned operations. More information can be found on our website. Information related to the flow test can be submitted by using the links on the bottom of the slide. Next slide. The key points summarized here have all been discussed with the exception of the last point related to energy generation. Energy generation at the main stem dams under the basic simulation is 8.7 billion kilowatt hours. The long-term average is 9.4 billion kilowatt hours. Next slide. And for my last slide, which shows the Missouri River Basin Weekly Update, which is found on our website at the address shown on the top of the slide. This webpage gives a general overview of the current conditions in the Missouri River Basin and is updated weekly, usually on Tuesday mornings. That concludes my comments. Eileen, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Matt. And our next call will be July 11th at 1 o'clock. And for the media, any of your speakers are listed here on this slide. We'll move to the question and answer session. We have 38 people on the call right now, and thank you for joining us. We'll go in alphabetical order by state. Please be sure to state your name and the organization you represent before asking your question. You'll need to press *6 to unmute your phone or unmute from your computer screen if you use the webinar to call in. We'll start with the state of Iowa. Kansas, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota.
Yes, this is Rod Gilmore with Friends of Lake Sakakawea of North Dakota. What are the projected releases for Lake Sakakawea for June, July, and August?
Matt or John?
Yeah, we're getting that. Yeah.
Releases are projected to be 22,000 CFS through the summertime.
And that is an average daily release. There will be some peaking in there.
Okay, and did I hear correct that Oahe summer releases were going to be at 33,000?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other from North Dakota? Okay. South Dakota? Wyoming? Any last minute questions before I pass it back to John? John, it's all yours.
Thank you, Arlene. As I stated in my opening remarks, life safety is the Corps of Engineers' priority. As we transition into the summer months, people will be spending more time on or near the water, whether that be for business such as agriculture, irrigation and navigation, or for pleasure such as fishing or boating. Being on or near the water can be dangerous, so please use caution and use the proper safety equipment. Also, keep in mind that the meteorologic and hydrologic conditions in the basin can change and sometimes change quite rapidly. I encourage everyone to keep a close eye on the weather, access the information on the NOAA and National Weather Service websites for the most up-to-date weather information and forecast, and check out our website for information on reservoir releases and pool levels. Also, the slides that you saw today are on our website as well, so you can access those there if you need any information from the side, information off of the slides. I will offer one last chance for questions before ending the meeting. Going once, twice. With that, thank you very much for dialing in, and I will end the call now. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes today's call.